Thank you for joining us on SunScream. Tonight, Spencer Hamilton. Spencer lives in Austin, Texas. His first book, Kitchen Sink, is a short story collection, and The Fear is his first novel. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, my guest is Spencer Hamilton. Spencer, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. What is the skull behind your right shoulder there?
That is a new special edition of Frankenstein.
Okay.
It's gorgeous. It has inserts with folio art, and it's fantastic. Actually, here.
Is that Leslie's?
No,
No.
I think it was
Okay.
a Kickstarter campaign.
Okay. Very cool. No, I asked because Leslie is coming on in October.
Oops.
I know it passed out. It fainted at not being Leslie's. Don't worry about it. So the skeleton used to be dressed like Freddy Krueger,
Oh, okay.
and the glove is still here, but like the hand used to be up here, and it was wearing the glove. And actually, I think it's during the Grady interview, it collapsed and scared the living crap out of me. So
I assumed the skeleton was just hot for the summer. But
well, we lit him more like a Jalo film.
there you go. Okay.
So we fixed up the lighting a bit, and made it more creepy on set.
I dig the new look though.
Yeah, it's funny because we have to take everything down and fix it back because we basically just need to clean everything up and organize better. Because we scrambled to make the set initially, and it's funny if you watch the evolution of the episodes from the first one with Gary Pullen to like now, just all the different changes that have happened.
The little evolution. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it goes. So I'm trying to think of a good place to begin. I got it's funny with some books I have these major themes I pull out, and that's the case with The Fear. So
Yeah.
we've talked in the past about sort of like when I get into specifics, and fair warning, there be spoilers. So yeah, I've got some major themes to talk to you about, and then perhaps some more specific stuff. And it's funny because looking at your bookshelf, I even see some of the major themes lingering behind you.
Yes. Perfect.
So it makes me feel like I'm correct, which is always a good feeling.
Like you've done your homework.
I know, it's amazing. Though I've talked to some other authors about this. It's also funny because I've come to realize that it's actually uncommon that people have actually read the books when they do these interviews.
It is. That was the first thing I noticed when you invited me to the series, and it marks you apart from the others. You know, I'm sure most authors perk up like, oh, he's read it. Okay. You know,
I can't imagine not, you know, like,
yeah, I mean, it's a time management thing, I think. So I think it's pretty easy to do these interviews and make excuses for not having the time to read these books. So it really sets you apart, I think, in a positive way, you know.
what's the point in doing it if you haven't read the book?
I don't know, exposure.
You're speaking to an author, and you're speaking to the author about his or her work.
I agree with you 100%. I'm just trying to figure out what could possibly be going on.
So you have to be diplomatic on this side. I know. I just look great because the author's like, yeah, that guy reads the books.
Exactly. Yeah.
The beast is going to be for this fall because it's yeah. I have feelings.
I will say I did an interview a couple weeks ago, and that interviewer had also read the book, but we didn't get to do quite a deep dive as I suspect we'll do for this one, because the idea was, you know, listeners should be able to read it after if they haven't
yet. Our idea with this is definitely you should have read it before you watch.
Like, this is what people will seek out after they've read it, right? Supplementary material. I dig it.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean, it's kind of like a book club in its own way. And it's interesting too, because obviously this program started because of COVID. Your book is because of COVID, and now we still have COVID. So you could write The Fear too, the Electric Boogaloo, I feel like.
Oh God. I what's funny about that is I wrote this book very fast.
Well, you
And
had to. You had
well, yeah, because I was thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna put this out and people are gonna be done with the pandemic. And I even my original goal was July of last year, and I ended up having to push it back a month. But I was thinking, man, it's not gonna be relevant anymore. And here we are a year later, and it's
more than a
still,
year.
yeah, by the time this airs, I guess. A year later to my publishing the book,
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought you
um
meant to like COVID.
right. No, but it's crazy in a bunch of exasperating, anger inducing ways, but
So
yeah, I wrote this book. I started it right when the pandemic started, um and wrote it took about 3 or 4 months, I think, from start to finish. And I was thinking that we were going to be out of this by the time the book was out, and silly me.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because I think a lot of horror literature has come out in this time period, and I feel like there's a
Mhm.
greater engagement right now than you'd seen probably since, I don't know. I mean, Stephen King's obviously around still making stuff, but I mean, like the height of Stephen King in the
Right,
90s and
right.
Dean Koontz and people like that, that kind of has waned off to some degree. They're more sort of just like mythic pantheon figures at this point. And now what I think you're seeing is this resurgence of a new
Mhm.
generation of horror authors and an engagement with interest, because I think horror itself is seeing a renaissance.
Yeah, I think horror tends to go in waves through the decades, and we're definitely at a high tide right now, you know? So I completely agree with that. And I think that it was already coming into the mainstream um, at the beginning of 2020. And I think when the pandemic hit, it really connected with people. So it was just a confluence, you know. And I feel pretty lucky to be in the community right now because it's just we're getting the best shit,
The best
we,
shit.
we really are. I mean, maybe I'm biased, but
See,
whether
that's the
it's
t-shirt you need to put out.
what would it say? We're getting the best shit or just the best?
uh I don't know, horror 2021, we're getting the best shit.
um, I I'll make those t-shirts if you
Okay.
sell them.
I mean, we made clay a meme with possums.
That's right. That's right. I
Because I was
remember
obsessed with that phrase.
you mentioned that phrase. What's the phrase again?
A pile of possums.
Pile of pot. You mentioned that on Twitter to me,
Mm.
and I was searching everywhere for a Clay McLeod Chapman book called A Pile of Possums. I was like, what am I missing? What is going on?
I told him that's what he should have called Whisper Down the Lane, because that line just stayed with me for
Right, right.
days. It's when he goes to take out the trash and there's a pile of possums in the trash can, and
No,
that's where he
what
describes it.
there was another early title he mentioned in his interview with you,
Yeah, I
about the
don't.
Satanic Panic. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that whole book, actually. Little plug for Whisper Down the Lane.
He's good on Twitter. I will say he responds to you. If you
Mhm.
if you tweet Clay McLeod Chapman, he will retweet you.
That is a fact.
It is amazing. I'm like, dude, do you sleep? Because his retweets, because I'll get like notifications from some people, and for some reason I always get like a notification, and it's like, you have 17 notifications. Like, oh good, people are looking at us on Twitter. Oh no, it's all Clay McLeod Chapman retweet. And then I've missed the tweets. Love you, Clay. Um, so yeah, I mean, in terms of the fear and COVID, you're in Austin still, right?
Hmm.
Because I know you'd said at one point to me that you were moving to Philadelphia, I think.
Yeah, I'm in the process, but right now it's a long process.
Yeah, I imagine it's about to be longer.
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting to me because you integrate aspects of the actual history of what's going on,
Hmm.
right? You have these not every chapter begins with one, but most chapters begin with like a pressy that's something from the news, usually Donald
Hmm.
Trump saying something
Right.
that's not very reassuring. Um, and I just like call it what it is.
That's a great tagline, by the way. Like the Trump administration, not reassuring.
See, that could have been the subtitle of the fear too, not
That's
reassuring. um, I look for the weirder title possibilities for books when I
Mhm.
read them.
I
Uh,
noticed. You've got a gift.
uh, Something like that. That's all. What was the pony one that came out too?
You said that you're writing a nonfiction book about horror in the 90s, right?
Yes.
I'm very much looking forward to all of your proposed subtitles for that.
Oh, I mean, I could tell them to you. It's only
I,
4 chapters, so it's really easy.
oh, it's only the four that you described in an earlier interview.
Yeah, each chapter is
Those are the
about
four.
45 pages long.
Oh, okay. Very interested in that.
Yeah, I think my favorite is Clinton's Witches is my favorite.
Hmm. Yeah, you talked about like the witch and bitch
Mhm.
connection.
My entire theory is that Hillary Clinton is the Blair Witch.
Right. The and Monica was
Well,
uh
she's essentially characters from the Crucible.
okay.
Yeah, because Bill Clinton has an affair, John Proctor has an affair,
Okay, so Bill
and the
Clinton's
'96
John
version of the
Proctor.
yeah,
I
and so the
like
Daniel
this.
Day Lewis Crucible comes out in '96.
This is this is a theory I can get on board for.
Well, all right. Here's a little teaser. Um, the first Blair Witch comes out in '99, right? When Hillary's running for Senate.
Mhm.
When does the remake come out?
I don't know.
2016, when she's running for president.
Oh my, okay. I didn't even realize there was a remake.
Well, it's sort of like the girl's brother goes looking for her. It's
Hmm.
the first true sequel because the second one isn't really a sequel.
Okay.
The,
Yeah.
the second one is like, oh, it was all fake, but it's not.
I've only seen the original. I do remember, like, I bought into their whole marketing ploy where these were not actors, real
Yeah,
people. Like I was a teenager,
yeah.
just kind of fucking around with friends. And
Well,
so it
because
was,
Sci-Fi Channel like ran a documentary about
yeah,
like
yeah,
a special. It was really like a really good marketing campaign that you could never do anymore.
that's true.
But again, tying it back to Hillary, it all dealt with like viral internet persuasion of people. So if you look at the
Mhm.
original, you compare it to like Pizzagate and QAnon.
One thing that I love about that is, and is kind of a major theme in the fear is like the Blair Witch Project has this almost ridiculous conceit, but it airs at a time where real life is also a ridiculous conceit,
Mhm.
and so you almost have to like live in the real world to buy into how strange this fiction is.
Yeah.
And that's very much how 2016 probably was with the remake and the presidential election, and how 2020 was. There's so many things in this book that are just ridiculous.
Mhm.
Um, but the idea is that the time that we all lived in, and this is one of the few times where everybody experienced this all-encompassing event. The time we're living in is also laughable on the face of it, you know.
Sure.
And so that was what I was trying to go for with the epigraphs at the front of each chapter that you mentioned, is to kind of remind the reader of the absurd reality, you know.
Okay.
Actually, I think I got a review. It's one of my favorites because the reviewer said that the book was pretty believable, but the one thing that she found completely unbelievable and ridiculous was that there was a fire station a few blocks up from this apartment. And the reason why I love that is because there's a fire station a few blocks up from my apartment. Like, I literally just put my apartment where I'm sitting right now
Right.
into the book. And that was another thing that I just plucked from real life. And again, it's just kind of, I mean, I grew up in a house 3 houses down from a fire department. So in a way, this has just kind of always been a random thing in my life. But somebody read it and was like, "That's crazy. That wouldn't happen." And I kind of love that, you know.
I mean, we often find that the true aspects are weirder than the fictitious ones, because the
Stranger
fiction
than
tends
fiction,
to
yeah.
like want to self-editorialize.
Hmm. The fiction, you know, you have a master planner behind it saying, well, how do these pieces fit together? Well, in real life, pieces do not fit together. uh, Coincidences make up conspiracy theories, as we saw all through 2020. And and there's just no rhyme or reason, but that's not the case with fiction.
So I mean, it's interesting because of what you've done, because how you structured it, that you bring in a cast of real world figures into
Hmm.
the fiction. I mean, and it's kind of meant to be that way, because it also increases the paranoia of the text as well. And I mean, you have different touchstone moments where you're dealing with the various culture war problems that are
Hmm.
just constantly reemergent, particularly in 2019 and 2020.
Hmm.
Um, and so, you know, in my notes here, it's like you've got queerness, you've got COVID, you've got racism, you know, and it's just like that was that summer.
Yeah, I mean, that summer, those topics were leading our lives, you know, with the George Floyd protests and and the constant misinformation from the people running the country, and the vitriol of people just fighting each other, and QAnon and all these things. It's kind of hard to believe. So I wanted to use those touchstones for my readers to, you know, not just like immerse themselves in the story, but also to, in a way, keep them on edge, you know, which is a little cruel of me because I think we've all been on edge enough.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because you do the slow burn, I feel like,
Hmm.
in the book until the end, and then it goes batshit crazy, kind of in a
Hmm.
literal way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so that those last final chapters, that was the first clear cut image of the book that appeared to me. And so I was trying to figure out, you know, what would I be putting these characters through leading up to it. And I found that the answers were in my everyday life. um, and you know, I really wanted to make these characters feel real. um, so I put a lot of reality into their experiences. um, Little things, I think. Also, though, in a big way, I wrote this book as therapy, as a type of, you know, cathartic way to track my days and just not go insane from quarantine. And so I would take little frustrations that I'm living through and be like, okay, well, how are my characters going to get through that? Because it was like an oblique way of looking at how I would handle these things that I was going through, you know.
So you got the title The Fear, which I
Mhm.
mean, in my mind, Hunter S. Thompson,
Okay. Okay.
right? Because the fear is contagious in Hunter S. Thompson as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Was that ever present, or
Um,
is this the first time it's coming up?
no, I mean, I'm not too familiar with his work. I know
Okay,
that you're a fan, but he was not on my mind, I'll say.
that's
Um,
fair.
Originally, it was called Viral,
Okay,
because I was trying to, connect this theme of it wasn't. I wasn't speaking about the actual virus. I was speaking about just how um, we were all collectively as a society kind of working ourselves up into a panic and feeding into this maelstrom of 2020. and
sure.
uh, and so the idea was that I was speaking toward that um, that mob psychology. And oh, and as I was writing it, I realized that the term viral didn't quite hit to the core of what I was speaking about. And so that's when I knew I needed to change it to the fear. And
Okay.
I also like I think I mentioned to you, not in this interview, but I mentioned to you how much I love Grady Hendrix's Paperbacks from Hell.
Mhm.
Um, I was reading that when I started plotting this book, and so I knew that I wanted I wanted that artwork of an 80s horror paperback. And so when I thought of the title for The Fear, it just, I feel like it hit much closer to the aesthetic that I was going for, the rats, the fog, those sort of things.
Sure. Um, yeah, I mean, because obviously, as you say, and as rearticulated by Thompson, is that the fear is this contagious thing as well. Like it
Mhm.
spreads just as much. You think of I saw the devil or something like that,
Mhm.
where fear just pervades. And I mean, even if it's rationalized at the end, that you probably should have been afraid.
Well,
Um,
I think of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds radio play.
sure.
Um, it's just it is this contagious thing. Um, I know that a lot of us throughout 2020 have spent a lot of time probably uh, taking solace in memes, right? Uh, but like the term meme, it was created by an evolutionary biologist coining a term about how ideas have this osmosis effect of passing through the collective. And I think that that's even truer if you take an emotion that's heightened and really casts out any kind of logic or rationalization. Um, and fear is perhaps the biggest one.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, because in again, spoilers. Uh, it's funny because I got a Doctor Who question for you too.
Oh, okay.
Speaking of the phrase spoilers, but it's sort of like the original version of Nosferatu, or even more so the Herzog version. It's like the bad doesn't lose in this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely what it was. Besides, I couldn't write a happy ending while I was living. Like, I don't know.
Well, it's not over. I mean, like even now, it would kind of look absurd.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, Get Out, one of my favorite movies. Originally, Jordan Peele had an ending where your main character does not win, you know, and he finds himself in prison.
Mhm.
And I think it was definitely more realistic, but he realized, Jordan Peele was very smart. He realized that that's really not what audiences needed. And so he gave it a happier ending. And I just, I feel like I couldn't take that path.
I think the word needed just hoisted a lot of work there.
Yeah, I mean, he's speaking toward a very different thing than
Yeah,
I
I
am.
mean, I think that's a studio amping up pressure kind of situation more than
Oh,
audience
I
need.
I don't think so. I don't think it was a studio mandate at
I
all.
do. I'm going to disagree with you there.
Wow. Okay. I mean, what I've heard him speak about, I could be wrong, but I don't remember him talking about that. But I mean,
Oh, but you wouldn't either.
I
So
hope that it's not, a studio mandate. But I guess now that that's the huge hit and he can do whatever he wants, the studios be damned. Maybe we'll start to see more cynical endings from him.
I'm going to disagree with you there too.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, studio um I was just reading a bunch of stuff on like the making of Forrest Gump of
Mm,
all things, and just the amount of attempts of studio interference in a movie that's as banal as
mhm.
Forrest Gump. So something like a horror movie that's actually got controversial themes, I can only imagine.
No, yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't think that every studio and every movie experience can be passed on to all movies,
Sure.
um, especially if there's different budgets, different box office expectations, different bottom lines,
Mhm.
um, and but yeah, I totally see what you're saying.
Because you do get that sometimes, the movie made by committee.
Yeah, and it's usually a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I went and saw the Green Knight, Sir Gawain and the
Ooh,
Green Knight last night, and
how was it?
I did not like it. Um,
Oh,
yeah, and it's getting so much critical praise, and I have thought and thought and thought on it. But again, it might come back to the idea of I've actually read the book,
right.
or the epic poem, I should say.
Yeah.
Um, and it's very different. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like with Dracula with me. It's like it's a story that doesn't need editorializing. It's weird enough on its own. I mean, it's a 14th century text that actually has homoeroticism in it, like that's clear. Because I'm not sure how familiar with it. He gets kissed,
Yeah.
and he has to kiss the guy back because he has to return everything that was given to him. And the guy's wife gives him a kiss. And they show that in the movie. Actually, they show it once. It actually happens 3 times in the book. And I'm just like, because the book is really about chivalry,
Hmm.
and there's plenty of black magic and all kinds of weirdness going on, and it's part of the Arthurian mythos.
Hmm.
And I don't understand why the changes. It's sort of like when they try to force Shakespeare into a weird box that doesn't really make sense.
Well, I don't know. Let me pull on that thread a
Okay.
little bit more. Are you of the are you of the opinion that certain classics that you find complete as they are, um, they shouldn't be toyed with or as you said, editorialized, and the material should shine through, the original material should shine through if you're going to play with it?
um I guess my response, so in terms of like say Shakespeare, right, I think that Roman Polanski's Macbeth is the best film version of any Shakespeare,
Okay.
which is very authentic. That having been
Mhm.
said, Ian McKellen's Richard III is my second choice, which is definitely
not. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, now the problem I have with Gwaine is I mean, Gwain's been done before. The Green Knight's been told before on film.
Right.
But it's my same problem with Dracula again. Nobody tells the actual story. So there's actually no film of the thing. There's 200
That's
plus
fair.
Draculas.
Yeah.
There is no actual Dracula. And the most obscene one of late is the BBC one they just did the 3-part series of, which made me want to throw my TV from my 3rd-story balcony.
That's fair. I guess I come from a theater background, and
Sure.
so with Shakespeare in particular, um, a lot of production companies love to take. I was in Manhattan in 2011, and
Mhm.
I did a production of oh Titus Andronicus,
Okay.
and we did it in a way that set it in like a future apocalyptic, like dystopian world,
Sure.
and there was a lot of special effects with like blood packets and that sort of thing. And
There's a
so
joke about that in another play. Shit. Yeah, that's not going to come to me. I saw it with Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane were in it. It's a he
you mean
wrote
the
Shakespeare
producers?
in Love. No, 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 no. Richard Grant played the character though, who says
Okay.
I did this production of Titus Andronicus, and every time an actor came on stage, a blood placket splatted them in the face. That's the line.
I love that, but I mean the point is, I think that adapting art that is spoken to large groups of people, especially Shakespeare because it's so old, or The Green Knight. I think there's a certain power to that, and I'm a big proponent of it. It doesn't mean that it's always good, So
I don't have a problem with recontextualizing.
right.
I have a problem when you completely change giant aspects of the story.
Of the tone, the theme of the story, or the plot.
No, the plot.
Oh, see, the plot doesn't. If it's thematically uh, true, then I think that the plot
But it
is
wasn't
here or
is the
there.
problem here, because thematically Gwaine is one of the purest knights. I mean, Galahad is the most pure of Arthur's knights, but Gwaine is pretty high up there. And the
Right.
conclusion of the book is they actually all wear this green sash to show his ultimate failure
Mm-hmm.
at the round table. So all the knights wear actually a green sash forevermore. They
Not in
also
the movie.
no, and they totally ripped off Martin Scorsese, and I've read a bunch of reviews and nobody's mentioned this. They ripped off Martin Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ too toward the end of the movie for like a good 20 minutes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's that expression, the book was better, that that you'll invariably hear, but I don't know, with movie adaptations of books in particular, um, I I tend to understand, it's a different medium, so they're dealing with different materials, but with imagery and sound and cinematography, but they're also dealing with a shorter time frame, and
Oh, this is a slow paced film too,
but
I will
even
say.
then, but so I tend to not be as harsh on movie adaptations as I
Okay.
think most people are. I'm very excited to see The Green Knight, but
Yeah, I mean,
after I
I'm
see it,
sure
we'll
I
have a
will be
little talk.
curious to hear what you think, because I just
I'll let
it
you
was also
know.
the first movie I've seen since COVID in
Oh,
a movie
okay.
theater. Obviously
Big
not the first.
expectations.
Well, I mean, an A24 movie seemed like a good choice.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think maybe you should have gone my route. The first movie I saw after getting vaccinated was Godzilla versus Kong.
I see. I did the at home.
Oh no, I rented out a theater with some friends,
Oh,
and
nice.
it was the best way to return, because you do not go in there expecting a work of art. It's
Sure.
just a good time, and it was great.
Yeah, I definitely think my expectation meter was through the roof. And
Yeah.
honestly, I wish, though I don't know it'll be possible, I wish I'd waited for the lamb, because I think that's going to creep the crap out of me.
Mm.
Have you seen the previews for the lamb?
No,
It looks genuinely upsetting.
I haven't even heard of it.
Oh,
I'm gonna
you
look this
definitely,
up
it's another
afterwards.
A24, but the joke on one of the horror boards I follow was that the lamb will be the most A24 movie to ever A24. And I
Well,
think that
now
that's
I'm
correct. And
excited just
actually,
for
during the
that.
opening, they have like the sequence where the lambs form an A24 as they walk through the field. And I'm like, yeah, it's almost like the SNL parody of the Wes Anderson horror movie.
It's a parody of a parody of a parody, and then
Yeah, I mean, you just
we're
went
back
way
around
through the
again.
rabbit hole in this one.
Ouroboros.
I am looking forward to Candyman too, though, I gotta say.
Mhm.
I'm hoping I get to
Same,
see that in the theaters.
same.
Which it's funny because I haven't looked forward to a movie in movie theaters in a while, I have to say.
Well, you have all of these movies that, for obvious reasons were pushed back so far because we were all stuck at home. Um, but like in terms of books, it was kind of, I mean, as you said, a renaissance, especially in horror. You just get slammed with all these great new books.
Yeah, because
You
they
know,
can come out and it's not because
hmm
Amazon obviously exploded.
yeah. I mean, not just can they come out, but now you've got time to read them. You know.
Well, and people were reading them to each other.
hmm
Like that became a thing on like Facebook and things. People were reading books at night, just
Yeah.
Facebook Live reading a book.
Well, yeah. So when the pandemic first started, I had just published my first book,
Mhm.
and so what I was doing was it was a collection of short stories. So I started doing Facebook Lives where I'd read a story there every week or so, and it was a little fun. But I was thinking, hey, we'll do this for a few weeks, and then everything will go back to normal. And then after that, I was thinking, oh, maybe I should start writing another book, and then oh, maybe I should write something that'll help me get through this madness, and
And now
and then the
you're
fear.
now you're playing the sequel.
Oh God, no. I had to promise myself that I will never write a sequel for The Fear, specifically because of the ending, but
Well, yeah,
maybe
it could
I'll
come back and
mention
terrorize
that
someone else.
later. I don't know.
It's interesting too because I see a copy of his book behind you, and the last movie to bring this around in a more complete a circle. The last movie I saw, which also made me think of The Fear before the pandemic, was Colorado Space,
Oh, okay. That's
and I
interesting.
became obsessed with that during the early days of COVID
Oh, wow. Um,
because that's what I felt like I was experiencing. Because I was at home with my parents and trapped. And I was like, oh my God, I'm really in a Lovecraft story. I'm trapped on an island right now.
oh man. Yeah. I mean, Lovecraftian, I guess, is a word you could definitely use
Well, yeah,
to.
you use him in one of your epigraphs too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I use a
Do
Lovecraft
I?
quote for the very last one. Yeah. He has an essay where he talks about the evolution of fear in humans, and where it starts as a survival mechanism, and how that's kind of become obsolete, so it's transformed into something else. And I don't that just really stuck with me.
Okay.
And so I was very excited to use that quote at the end. What is it? It's something about fear.
Hey, I remembered it was there and you had forgotten, so I
That's
was
true.
going.
Hey, it's
Now you're
it's been a
asking me to
while.
quote it.
No, I mean it's straight from that essay. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but
I
sounds
probably
nice for a
Plato
book
kind
called
of
The
hints to
Fear,
that too, right? Like the shadows in the wall and that part of what that's all about too.
Oh yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The oldest the oldest emotion that mankind has developed has been something necessary to survive all the scary things outside,
Yeah.
you know.
I'm gonna make a couple weird transitions here now.
Go for it.
So you recently came out,
Hmm.
and obviously you've got queer characters
Hmm.
at the heart of the fear. What part of your own sort of like journey about your sexuality was also built in? Because this does seem, I mean, as you've already alluded to, autobiographical on some levels.
Right. Yeah. Oh God. I mean, I'll try not to talk for a full hour about that,
That's
but
fine.
uh, so I plucked a lot of my own personal experience, um, and dumped it into my characters' lives again as like a catharsis. And part of that was these characters had both Jack and Ash. They both just moved to Austin from Northern California, which is where I moved here from just a few years ago. Only a little before the pandemic, just like a year before. But and even though I came from California, I lived in a very strange conservative bubble. And I moved to a very strange liberal bubble. And so I had a very sheltered childhood. Um, and because of that, it took until right before I turned 30 to start to unpack my feelings about my sexual identity. And a lot of that was written through Jack, with uh, her own struggles with what her parents had told her and taught her, and the way that people treated her. I have a close friend who, she was the first person that I went to when I started to question things about myself, because I know she'd gone through a similar journey. And one thing that she told me was that she presents herself as rather feminine. Um, and because of that, um, when she was a kid, she would always see these movies where people who looked like her, women who looked like her, would always be set up with the man in, like, you know, the romantic comedy or whatever it is she's watching. And she said that she just never was given the space um, to question that, because it was just always how life was. Um, she didn't look like, you know, particularly butch or anything, and so it was just never a part of her experience, and she wished that had been different. So part of my writing Jack was creating this you know, traditional female archetype that does not fit into that archetype. And she's questioning the the conservative thoughts that she's been taught as a child. And I think at that point when I was writing it, I wasn't questioning uh, out loud for myself. Like, I thought this was all character work. And so it was kind of a mind fuck in that way, where I can't tell you how much of this book was really me working through a lot of deep seated um, subconscious thoughts. And so I realized that I was bisexual. It was a long process, but I got there. And then I put out this book. And okay, here's another angle to this discussion that I haven't really spoken about, but you know, since we're doing this deep dive, uh, you heard it here first. I felt um, very much like I was being pressured to out myself by readers.
Okay.
Um, there's this discourse that I don't think it comes from a good place, but I think that it can go to unhealthy areas pretty quickly, where people are saying, what gives you the right to write those characters?
Mm.
And it makes the discussion about diversity in fiction a little difficult, but I think it's an important discussion to have. And so when you have these people who don't know me, don't know my experience, but are writing about how there's this straight white man who has written these queer women into horror situations where it's horror, characters in horror suffer, and there were some pretty nasty accusations about my motivation to do that, and I was really struggling with that. And I read an essay by the author of, oh God, this is Albertati. I'm sorry, I need to get her first name. Rebecca Albertati, or Alberti. I'm butchering it.
You're fine.
Becky Albertalli. Okay. I'm nervous because I haven't spoken about this, and so her name flew out of my head.
No worries.
But so Becky Albertalli wrote this essay that I read about how she, at a similar age to me, realized that she was not straight, and that was a very personal journey for her. But then she started to receive these attacks, and I'm not saying that I was receiving them on the same level as a hugely best-selling author like her, not at all, but still it really spoke to me. And she got so much of that vitriolic online spewing that she did finally come out. And I imagine that was not an ideal way to do it.
Sure.
And on a much smaller degree, that's kind of what my journey was. Now, I was able to focus on the positive sides of it. It wasn't like it wasn't a secret I felt I needed to keep for my own safety or anything like that many people have to deal with. And so I did decide to come out as like my own choice. I tried to not make it as a reaction to the negativity that I was seeing. And I will say, like, on the whole, it was a very positive experience for me coming out as an author. The horror community in general is, I've found, much more accepting than other spaces,
Sure.
And I think overall that's because, in a way, fiction as a whole teaches empathy to its readers because we're reading about characters, but horror specifically, I think, is one of the more empathetic genres that you can read. And so because of that, it was a wonderful experience for me to come out, and I've had some great conversations with readers, and just a really great time. But again, I'd be dishonest if I didn't mention the specific reason that started my deciding to come out, and I think that it's got some strange parallels with the fear,
Sure.
and again, just real life and fiction kind of walking side by side. But yeah, so that was my experience, um, with discovering and coming out. And I I love the characters that I wrote in the Fear, Ash and Jack. I've never had characters, especially Ash, that I felt so connected to. It's probably strange to say, especially Ash, after talking about how Jack was the one that I put all of my own uh, sexual identity questions
I don't
into.
know if it's a strange thing. I mean, because it becomes the projection of the ideal partner to the
Right, right.
desublimation.
No, that's exactly what it is. I think having Ash finally decide that she was going to get out of the cycle and break free and and do things for herself, I think was kind of me writing my own deliverance in a way. Um, and that's what it started out as. But by the end, I was thinking about Ash specifically after I wrote the book, like wondering where she went after the last page of her story and all of that.
Somewhere
But
with
I'm not going to
low
answer here,
ceilings,
but
like
yeah,
somewhere with low ceilings,
somewhere with low ceiling. I mean, hopefully a hopefully a hospital first, but
like netting, lots of
yeah.
netting in places. um, a quick question about the usage of the name Ash. I'm always on the lookout because I know you are a consumer of horror.
Hmm.
Some people aren't. Like Omakatsu is not really a consumer of horror. She just happens
Right,
to write horror.
right.
Um, is Ash an allusion to Evil Dead?
It's an accidental illusion. Like
Okay.
I definitely noticed later. Um, but really it just comes down to I love gender neutral names.
Okay. That leads
Um,
into my next question.
yeah, I wanted to choose names that, in the book description, I could make sure that people buying it knew that it was two women. But also I wanted nicknames. And so Jack and Ash, it became.
So it's interesting. So I mean, you pose it as the phrase general neutral, which I think I'm gonna try to nuance it a little bit more than that.
Mhm.
I think it's more like gender switching, I think is a
Yeah, yeah,
because
definitely.
there are times when you're reading it, you forget the gender. And I don't necessarily think that's per se gender neutral to the name. It's more
Right.
the reader constructs it. It's great because what it does is it makes you self-reflect in terms of like, why am I reading it toward a gender at this moment?
Hmm. Yeah, there's a John Scalzi book, Lock In, I believe it's called, where he doesn't specify a gender at all. And to the point where there's two audiobooks read by a man and a woman.
Okay.
And I, didn't go that far, but I love that concept. My newest book that I just put out, it's a slasher, and the main character, it started out as me wanting to subvert the trope of the final girl, and so I made my final character non-binary,
Okay.
and it was it ended up being much more than just subverting that trope, because I'd never read a book with the main character using they them pronouns, and so
Mm.
it was a um, it was a growing experience for me. And I've seen in a lot of the reviews from readers, I've seen the same thing where they were like, it was a small hill to get over at the beginning, and then it just became natural to me, and I really appreciate that. And I guess you could say that maybe that speaks to why I like gender switching names too.
It also, I mean, in a very loose way, it reminded me kind of both the meta aspect and the fan aspect of Supernatural in some ways too,
Oh, okay.
which obviously started as a fan thing that then entered into a meta thing within the show. I don't know
Yeah.
if you're a Supernatural fan or not, but
I've seen enough to know what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because they actually end the show, because the show becomes like a series of books within the show, and then at one point they actually go see a High School Musical that's been created of the show, and they end up at a convention based on the book series at one point.
I'm also
Um,
just a big fan of that kind of meta structure of stories.
yeah, I mean that's definitely the postmodern condition of horror
Hmm.
is meta, and I mean Scream obviously introduced that as the standard, and then probably Wes Craven's New Nightmare would be the next one to canonize it.
Hmm.
But I mean, we're still there. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
that's
definitely
a problem
agree.
with postmodernism in general, though, right? You can't escape it.
But I mean, I don't know. That's existed for a while, but there's definitely a lot more of it right now.
Yeah.
And I am a big fan. Like I was telling you before this, how much I loved True Story,
Mhm.
one of the other books from your SunScream series. And my favorite aspect of that book was how she wrote each section with a very specific uh, meta structure.
Yeah.
I really uh, connected with that. It maybe to some people feels like an experiment, but to me, it kind of heightens the story in a way.
The book on the audio book of that, actually, the male character that she created for it is read by a guy, and the other is read
Hmm.
by a woman.
Oh,
So
okay.
she does a thing too with a very specific voice
Oh, that's
uh,
cool.
in that. I'm curious, when you were reading it, did you think it was like, as the title suggests, a true story?
Uh, I mean, that occurred to me, definitely. But I think that the prologue put that thought to rest
Okay.
because the prologue, sets it up as time to tell my true story from the character's perspective.
Yeah.
So I think I did myself a favor by taking that question out of my mind so that I wasn't constantly, I wasn't constantly wondering about the author's intentions and
Yeah, it nagged me the whole time.
yeah, I can imagine that could get in the way of the experience.
I mean, it didn't so much get in the way. It was just sort of like the idea of sort of like one thing changing your life forever in like a cinematic way. It was just like in so many other characters, and that was more of the thing I stuck with throughout the book.
But also like, I put myself in my stories constantly.
Sure.
And so I know that not all authors do that, but I do know that some do. And so I guess that gave me a certain perspective where I was able to kind of shuck that away
Okay.
and and
See,
and
because I
not.
write nonfiction. So
I mean, yeah, you're kind of wired to do that.
yeah.
I
So
will say in her interview, she said that she hates House of Leaves,
yeah.
and it's one of my favorites. But I have to ask, a man of academia, which I mean, that whole book is just about the overly analytical academic conceit. What did you think
I
of
love
House of
House of
Leaves?
Leaves. I recommend
Okay,
it to people all the
awesome,
time.
cool, cool, cool.
I wish he would return my emails.
Same.
Yeah, no, I love that book. That book and The Historian are probably two of my favorite horror books.
The
Um,
Historian. Who's that by?
what's your name? See, I said it's my favorite book, and I'm so bad with names. Absolutely, and people, especially when I have directors on and they rattle off.
That's all right. I may bug you about
Starts
it
with a
later though.
K.
Okay.
I have it in the next room. Um, yeah. I don't know, because I went to William and Mary and like the college and the feel of the
Mhm.
school and stuff and the historian. It's like, I don't know, these like sensory memories that sort of like get awoken by it.
For sure.
I'm surprised that hasn't been turned into something too. I'm not surprised House of Leaves hasn't, because I don't know how you would do that
Yeah.
and be interesting. Because it's so much about sort of like putting things online and stuff.
Yeah, I
But
think there'd be a way to make House of Leaves into an audiobook, but it would
yeah, I meant
be
like a TV
super
series or
long.
something. I don't know how you
Yeah.
would turn that to the visual. It's too,
Someone call Mike Flanagan. I feel like he'd be the one who could figure it out.
yeah, it's just, it's so text based though. Like it's
Yeah.
about the experience of reading itself in some ways. I don't know how you translate that, because I mean the typography and everything changes. So yeah, I thought that was one of the more interesting, what I call horror blasphemies, was the blatant, just, I hate House of Leaves. Like, okay.
I mean, I get it. It's a challenge, but that's part of why people love the book, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and it's definitely a creepy read.
hmm
Like
You
that's
just
the other,
you really have to give yourself to it.
yeah.
And so I can see how someone could reach the end and just and not and have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, I fucking love that book.
Yeah, it's a fun one. And it was definitely the one to read for a good 6 months, I feel like.
Mhm.
And I feel like now it's a little bit more confused, because there's so much, as we've been talking about, that's out, and people are just like, because I see people asking for recommendations all the time. They get like 180 responses. Whereas I feel like, 2 years ago, you might have gotten like one or two, or you got 180, but they all be the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good time, but also a bad time to find a good horror book because how are you going to find it among a billion?
Well, you watch SunScream.
That's true. You watch SunScream.
And then you get a bunch of good read recommendations. Um, Let me ask you, continuing on this theme of queerness, let me ask you about what your perception of queerness in horror is right now, and what you've consumed as a watcher or a reader, and what you think is coming out that people might want to look toward.
Well, I think there's always been an element of queerness throughout the genre. But that being said, we're reaching a point finally where you called it a renaissance. I think it's a renaissance of queer horror right now too. Um, with the movement of make horror queer as fuck um, and many queer authors like Haley Piper and Eric LaRocca are really coming to the forefront. And I unequivocally love that. I love that there are queer creators and queer content that is um, becoming so popular. But I think the main reason, or a big reason why I love that, is how hand in hand the queer experience and horror have been for so
Sure.
long. Um, I think just in general, horror is such a great genre um, for a minority experience. Um,
Are you familiar with
because
Harry Benshoff?
no,
All right, he wrote a book called Monster in the Closet
oh,
that you might enjoy.
I'm definitely going to read that. Yeah, I'm part of a project right now that's called Make Horror Queer as Fuck or
Okay,
AF, and it's a collection of all these essays written by queer creators about you know um, just the queer experience as thematic elements, as plot points, as character and um, as a conversation between the content and the consumer. And I think that there's this deep well of um, untapped or not tapped enough stories revolving around queer themes. So I couldn't be happier that it's becoming, that it's going to the forefront, you know.
So are you a Lovecraft fan then? Because you've got the book Cthulhu behind you and you've got the quote.
um I love Lovecraftian horror.
There's
uh,
a queer version of Cthulhu is why I'm asking.
okay.
It's on
What's
YouTube.
it called?
Cthulhu.
I
It's
mean,
actually the Shadow over Innsmouth, but it's I mean by and large, but it's the character is most definitely gay.
I think the modern Lovecraft genre has gay shit through it.
Oh yeah.
All I went to the Lovecraft Film Festival in Portland a couple years ago,
Okay.
and the homoerotic short films were a highlight of the event, and I think that was my first taste of newer Lovecraft fiction. And I kind of love that. I don't know if it came about from, you know, people wanting to create from the taboo, or if it came from um, Lovecraftian themes in just being a queer person uh, living in society. Uh, but I'm a big fan of that. Yeah.
I have to, I mean, you know, because the Oscar Wilde quote of the love that dare not speak its name sort of
Mm,
revolves in my head when I think about it, because it's like the love that dare not speak its name, unnameable horror. You know, if you look at it
that's
one way in
true.
terms of like a
Yeah.
celebration, another way in terms of repression, and them sort of like being in the same discourse at the same time. I mean, obviously Lovecraft a
Yeah.
little bit later, but I don't think the zeitgeist had changed particularly much at that point.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with the term repression. You know, it's today, right now, this is all of that, um, the pressure under that repression releasing. At least that's how I see it.
Well, and I mean, you have so many of those stories that are also just like, I'm becoming something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
thing is grotesque and monstrous, but who is it grotesque and monstrous to? The status quo.
Yeah. I mean, look at my book, you know.
Right. Well, that's why I said I had a long road to get back
Mm-hmm.
around to a topic.
That was beautiful. You're a master. You're a master.
You know, I didn't signpost it at all, but I did go down the road because I actually have here Lovecraft queerness personified fear as the three notes to take me down the road.
You've got your receipts. I like it.
I try, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, let me ask you a couple of the more generic questions I tend to ask everybody, if I
Okay.
may. Of course, I've already mentioned it, so I'll go ahead and ask it. What is your horror blasphemy?
My horror blasphemy. Uh, it's kind of a newer take.
Okay.
It's not on a classic, but I'm very much not a fan of the Conjuring movies.
Oh, good. You fit
Like
in
that is
very
a
well on
very
here.
polite way of me saying that I
Oh man,
do
I
not
have
like those.
ranted about Blumhouse on any number of occasions.
Yeah, just the glorification of grifters who have hurt so many people. Fuck off, you know.
Yeah.
That new movie just,
Oh
oh,
man.
I feel myself getting ranty about it whenever I see
Well, it's
someone
funny because the
mention
movies have
it.
now become like a literalization of the iteration of what the Warrens were.
Yeah, I mean, I I guess I have to say I'm glad that the third one is so um it's so thinly veiled in its evangelicism, you know.
Yeah.
The first one, and maybe the second one too, I've only seen it once, but they are so well disguised as good horror movies, and so it's easy for a casual audience to eat it down. But that almost makes me hate it more, you know.
Yeah, because it becomes like, when I talk to students particularly, they'll be like, "Oh, The Conjuring," and I'll be like, "Just shoot me, just shoot me."
But yeah, I mean, you saw in my writing, I talk a lot about my dislike of organized religion, and
Yeah,
so I think that the Warrens are not just a product of that, but they cashed in on it, you know.
yeah,
And so yeah, that's my blasphemy. I'm glad we're on the same page.
yeah. I don't even consider that a blasphemy. That's just logical.
Yeah,
What do you think? Go ahead.
I think it bugs me even more that I do consider it a blasphemy, you know, because
Yeah,
I mean, it's such a
absolutely. I
popular
absolve
franchise.
you. It is not a blasphemy.
Thank you. What were you gonna ask?
Um, so one of the things and I've not talked to anybody about it yet, so you'll be the first, is the upcoming $400 million Exorcist trilogy.
Oh, I haven't even.
Yeah, Universal just announced this like 2 or 3 days ago.
Wow.
And they've got Ellen Bernstein on board to reprise her character. And Leslie Odom Jr. of Hamilton fame is
Oh, he's so great.
playing the lead. And I'm like, I'm
Oh,
glad you're organizing, good actors and all, but the guy directing it is the guy doing the new Halloween movies. And also, the Exorcist TV show was all right. Exorcist 2 is obviously horrible. Exorcist 3 is not bad. But I
yeah. Allow me to jump onto a soapbox for a bit.
sure.
I Have you seen Saint Maud?
Yeah,
Um, so I don't know what you thought of it, but I absolutely loved that movie.
it's all right.
And I think part of why I loved it is part of a bigger conversation for me where like I guess I'm so tired of Christianity being used in horror movies as the heroes, and like it's fun to do the satanic stuff, but I'm just tired of it, you know. And A24 speaking about with Saint Maud speaking about like uh other ways that religion can be horrific, you know.
Sure.
I found
Well, I
it
mean, even in like The Witch, right?
refreshing.
The devil wins in The Witch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm much more interested in the Saint Maud conversation than I am about like remaking The Exorcist
Yeah,
or doing another Conjuring movie or anything. And I mean, I say this, but at the same time, I still love a good, satanic comedy, like the one that Grady Hendrix wrote. You
that
know,
was Satanic Panic.
yeah, I love that movie.
No, that's
But
good. But there's not really Christianity in there.
no, but it's
And all
certainly
and the
connected.
demon wins in that one too.
Mhm. But yeah, so I don't know.
My
I'm a
favorite
little
of those
tired of
is
it.
Deathgasm.
Oh, I haven't watched that one. That's the Rock one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you've got to watch that one.
Okay. You gave me homework. The
Yeah.
last movie that you mentioned on Shudder that I watched was Southbound,
Oh,
and that movie blew my mind. So I will definitely watch Deathgasm.
yeah. Actually, on Shutter, I think you can watch when Joe Bob Briggs did it as well.
Okay.
Still, so I would watch that version so you get the commentary. No,
Mhm.
Southbound is definitely one of my highly underrated horror
Yeah.
films.
It very quickly became an all-time favorite because I just couldn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah, it's to me, it's the best anthology horror film.
So y'all go watch Southbound.
Everybody should go watch Southbound. What are you reading right now?
What am I reading? Well, I've got a bit of a currently reading situation problem right here.
Okay.
I've been reading The Way of Kings
Okay.
And the
You're
book,
reading The Hunger, I think.
yeah, the book is it's a nonfiction by Keith Houston about just the history of the creation of books in civilization. And I've been reading those two huge books for all year. But
Gotcha.
I'm very much a mood reader. So like you said, I'm about halfway through The Hunger by Alma, and I'm hoping you see up here. This is, all of the SunScream
Okay. So that's
books.
your version of this.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm
Okay.
halfway through those. I'm really enjoying it, but I'm a mood reader, so I've been bouncing around and grabbing other books in between.
Yeah.
So it might take me a little bit.
I
But
definitely had to like laser focus and just read them in sequence because it had to get done.
then also as an author, I had to set those aside this week for some arcs that I'm reading.
Okay.
I started a short story collection by Michael R. Goodwin called "How Good It Feels to Burn,"
Okay.
that I'm really enjoying. It's
All
out
right.
in September, I think. But
And what are you looking forward to reading that's not out yet?
oh, Stephen Graham Jones.
The My Heart is a Chainsaw.
Yes, yes, I'm a huge fan of his, and that book just, I mean, the cover alone,
Yeah.
and also he kind of, I'll, I'm ashamed to say, before reading him, I didn't realize that slasher was a genre that could be taken to books too, instead of just movies.
Okay.
And so it was reading him, the kind of, he's like the literary resident expert of slashers, essentially.
Yeah.
Reading him is what made me want to write my slasher.
Okay.
And so yeah, when it said that his next book is a slasher, and in a way almost all of his books are,
Yeah.
he tends to either write like noir, lit fic, or slashers. And so when it was announced and I saw that it was a slasher, I got really excited. So that's the one. What about you?
I got an arc coming from Chismar for the Boogeyman.
Okay.
That's coming out I think in October.
Yeah.
And then Rachel Harrison's Cackle.
I saw the cover for that. Is her witch book?
Yeah, so I'm interested to see what that's like because I felt like The Return was super witchy, and
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I'm curious to see, especially after talking to her a little bit about her moves against the trope. I'm kind of curious to see what she's done there. And that will probably be the last fiction I read until next year because I got so much nonfiction I have to read.
Yeah. Well,
I'm-
okay. I do like nonfiction. So if you could pick one from your nonfic TBR that you're most excited to dive into, what would it be?
So it's not just one because I but there's a series of books called the Devil's Advocate series,
Okay.
and each book is a monograph on a film.
Mm.
And
Oh,
there's quite a few
interesting.
of those. So we got like I think 5 of those authors coming on
Oh,
in
wow.
October, and I'm looking forward to. I've already read Brandon Graffius's on The Witch,
Okay.
but there's a couple more that I'm really looking forward to, like Suspiria and The Omen. So I'm looking forward to those because I Suspiria is one of my favorite horror movies too. So I'm just
It's a great one. I wasn't a fan of The Witch, but I did love Suspiria.
see, there's your blasphemy.
I guess I don't. It's weird that would be considered blasphemy. I don't have a very strong opinion about it. I just didn't
Okay.
really care for it.
I consider that. Yeah. So those are a series that I'm looking forward to diving more into because I have just kind of like got on that train, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And Kendall Phillips' new book is coming out, and I'm looking forward to reading that as well, which is a lot on social movement, active social movements in horror. That
That's
comes out in
interesting.
late September through Paul Grave. So I'm looking forward to that one too. And I'm looking forward to reading my own when it's done because that means it's done. And that's
Hey, I'm sincerely looking forward uh, to whatever it is going to end up being called. Do you have a title?
Yeah, it's
Kyle
called
Possum's Part Two.
no, it's called Millennial Monstrosities, the horrors of a 90s kid.
Ooh, okay, okay. That's really exciting to me as a '90s kid.
Yeah. So it's great because it's like it's my misspent youth.
Yeah,
Finally getting, you know, residual usage.
you're definitely more of a '90s kid. You remember the specifics a bit more than me.
Yeah, I'm 38 years old,
I
so
was born in I'm 31, so born in
yes.
'90.
So I mean that's the thing. Like I'm a true 90s kid. I was born in
Yeah.
83, so I was 7 going into the
Hmm.
90s. I was definitely already watching horror movies.
Definitely,
Uh
yeah.
so it was, it's front and center in terms of like how I remember a lot of my teenage years
I'm
is
jealous,
watching.
but that's part of why I'm so excited to read it because you've got, I think, kind of like what I was talking about with um, queer authors writing queer characters. You've got this book about the horror in '90s written by somebody who enjoyed horror in the '90s.
Yeah.
So
For better or for worse. And it's definitely got stuff that has absolutely never been written about.
I hope. I mean, it sounds like it just with the Blair Witch, Hillary Clinton connection.
Oh, I'm writing about the remake of Psycho.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very excited.
It's in the families chapter because I actually have a whole chapter on Doma and families. So
Dude, okay.
that's in there. So yeah, it's definitely it's coming together. It's all plotted out. I just need to sit down and finish writing it. The summer has definitely gotten away from me in a way. I'm about halfway done, so I'm about
Yeah.
100 pages right now. So
Yeah, it's not like you decided to take on a project where you read and interview 13 authors or anything like that.
yeah, I don't have a 37 person one coming up starting on September 26th either. That's every day of life.
Oh man.
So yeah, it's crazy, and then all the other stuff you have to take care of. I mean, we all have that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Um, and I don't know. I mean, the summer definitely got away from me. I don't know how you felt about it.
Oh, it does. My next release, I've I was supposed to write it last month and then I was going to write it this month and turns out I'm going to write it next month. It's just it keeps flying by.
So you come back to Shakespeare tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, creeps in this steady pace.
Beautiful. Look at that. Full circle.
Full circle. It's what I do, man. I try to bring everything back around. So, well, thank you for spending an afternoon with us, or an evening,
Yeah.
a spooky evening even. We really appreciate it. I very much enjoyed the book. I'm looking forward to seeing what's in the pipeline.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed this as well, and I can't tell you how much I enjoyed being invited on here.
No, definitely. We're glad to have you. So, and thank you all for tuning in. And as always, stay spooky. Thank you for tuning in to SunScream. Tune in next time for Goldie Modovsky.